I'm Vic Myers. Welcome to the Resistance. I'm going to do a 4-part video for this one. I hope you'll stick through it to the end, because I think by the end you'll understand why it concerns me a great deal. Part 1 is going to be about the Dred Scott decision, a Supreme Court decision of 1857. Part 2 is going to be about Donald Trump saying he's going to end birthright citizenship. Part 3 is going to be about Article 5 of the Constitution. And Part 4 is going to tie all 3 videos together, and I hope you'll see why it concerns me a great deal. So Part 1, the Dred Scott decision, 1857 United States Supreme Court. It was a 7-2 decision. It was widely regarded as the worst decision by the Supreme Court of all time. Now, if you consider the damage that Citizens United and Dobbs have done, then it's arguably not the worst, because it was rendered moot by the 13th and 14th Amendments. So what is the Dred Scott decision? Dred Scott was a slave, he and his wife, and they were suing for emancipation. And at the end of the decision, this is a very important part, the decision says that American citizenship is for whites only. American citizenship is for whites only. Now, this decision, the way it was worded and the arguments and all that, it was considered to be an originalist decision. And where have you heard that before with respect to our Supreme Court? All of our current conservative justices call themselves originalists. They say the original language is all that matters. And if you go by the original language, citizenship is only for white people. Now, another important thing to remember about this decision, it was never overturned. It is still technically the law of the land. It's just been rendered moot by the 13th and the 14th Amendments. The 13th Amendment is the one that abolished slavery, and the 14th Amendment is the one that gives us birthright citizenship. So keep that in mind. And if you think there aren't people out there today who want to use Dred Scott, you'd be wrong. Just this last August, the National Federation of Republican Assemblies tried to use the Dred Scott decision to argue that Kamala Harris was not a viable presidential candidate. In 2016, I think it was, a guy by the name of Stephen McAllister used the Dred Scott decision in an argument he was the Solicitor General for Kansas. In arguing before the Kansas Supreme Court, he used the Dred Scott decision to support his case in an anti-abortion argument. And that same Stephen McAllister went on to be a U.S. attorney in the first Trump administration. So folks, Dred Scott decision says only white people can be citizens. It has never been overturned, only rendered moot by the 14th and 13th Amendments. That's the important thing to remember going forward. Oh, and that the Republicans still believe in it. Good day. I'm Vic Myers. Welcome to the Resistance. This is part 2 of 4, Birthright Citizenship. So Trump's been in the news because the other day he gave an interview and said that he wants to end birthright citizenship. And of course, he couldn't say it without telling some lies. First one being that America is the only country that has it, when in fact somewhere around 30 countries around the globe have birthright citizenship, including his favorite country, the one where Putin lives. Also, he implies, every time he says this, he implies that he can do it, that he can simply do an executive order, and if he can't do an executive order, then he can get Congress to pass a law. That's a lie. It's in the Constitution. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution gives us birthright citizenship. So he hasn't been talking about it just in the last week. He wasn't talking about it just in the last campaign. He was talking about it 6 years ago, at least. I remember because that's when it first came to my attention. And I asked myself, why does he want to do that? And I came to the same conclusion then that I have now. He wants to do it because he wants only white people to be able to have a say in this country. He has a long history of racism, and this is just more fuel on the fire, if you will. So I'll remind you that yesterday I talked about the Dred Scott decision and how it's still the law of the land, technically. It's only rendered moot by the 13th and 14th Amendments. Donald Trump, by saying that he wants to end birthright citizenship and knowing that he can't do it with an executive order and he can't do it with legislation from Congress, he's trying to build up support to amend the Constitution. Because if he can amend the Constitution, he can get rid of the 14th Amendment. If he can get rid of the 14th Amendment, then Dred Scott is in force, and only white people have citizenship in America. I know it sounds like a stretch, right? But by the time I get to the end of these videos, I think you'll understand that I'm not just grasping at straws. To amend the Constitution, the way we all think about it is you have 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate propose an amendment, and then they send that amendment to the Constitution, they send it out to the states, and 3/4 of the states have to approve it. If they do, then it becomes a part of the Constitution. That's what we all think about when we think about amending the Constitution. Those of us who remember from high school that lesson. But there's another way to change the Constitution, and that's what I'm going to talk about tomorrow. And I hope you'll stick with me. Good day. I'm Vic Myers. Welcome to the Resistance. This is part 3 of a 4-part video. First part was about the Dred Scott decision. The second part was about Donald Trump saying he's going to end birthright citizenship. And today I'm going to talk about Article 5 of the Constitution. Article 5 tells us how we amend the Constitution. And when we think about amendments, most of us only think about how if you want to change the Constitution, then Congress passes an amendment. They have to have 2/3 of the House and the Senate. But if they do that, they send it to the states. And then the states ratify that amendment or fail to ratify it. And that's how you change the Constitution in most of our minds. But there's a second way. Article 5 also gives us the ability to call for a constitutional convention. To do that, you only need 2/3 of the states to call for a convention, and then it happens. Each state, if it happens, each state sends a delegation. Constitution's not clear exactly how they pick that delegation, but the states presumably would figure that out for themselves and choose who's going to represent them. So 2/3 of the states, that would be 33 states. If they get 33 states, they can call a constitutional convention. Currently, the Republicans control the state legislatures in 31 states. And out of those 31, 24 of them, they also control the governor's seat. So they're pretty close, folks. And they've been trying. There's a organization called COSA, Convention of State Action. It was founded by a guy named Mark Meckler, who founded the Tea Party. It's endorsed by Kevin Roberts, the lead author of Project 2025 and the president of the Heritage Foundation. Mike Johnson, our current Speaker of the House, well, when he was a state legislator, he voted to have Louisiana call for a constitutional convention. And so far, there's 19 states that have done so. 19 states who have said we need to have a constitutional convention. In the last 10 years, this COSA organization, they've had 2 mock conventions, sponsored in part by the Heritage Foundation. So we are closer than you think to having a constitutional convention. They've been working on it. They want it badly. And if they do it, well, the implications are quite scary. In 1986, the movie The Fly, Gina Davis said, "Be afraid, be very afraid." And tomorrow, I'm going to tell you why we should be. Good day. I'm Vic Myers. Welcome to The Resistance. This is Implications, part 4 of a 4-part series. To sum up recap the first 3 parts, in 1857, the Supreme Court gave us the Dred Scott decision, in which they said that citizenship is for white Americans only. And that decision has never been overturned. It's only been rendered moot by the 13th and 14th Amendments. There's still a lot of Republicans out there who believe in that decision and think it should be enforced. Donald Trump's call for an end to birthright citizenship, it's a red herring. It's not about immigration. It's about convincing you and I that we need to amend the Constitution to do it. And we'll never get the Congress, we'll never get 2/3 of each houses to agree to amend the Constitution to get rid of the 14th Amendment. So we'll just have to have a constitutional convention, right? Well, that's a stated goal of the Heritage Foundation. In fact, in the last 10 years, they've participated in 2 mock conventions. And they have 19 states officially on board to call for it. So what are these implications? Think about Donald Trump's famous Bible. It's got the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution in it, with a little quirk. It doesn't have the 11 through 27 amendments of the Constitution, which means it doesn't have the 13th and 14th Amendments, which means it doesn't have recognition of a woman's right to vote. It doesn't have presidential term limits. It doesn't have direct election of our senators. And it doesn't have several other things too. If they succeed in calling for a constitutional convention, the Republicans will severely outnumber the Democrats. And the Democrats won't be able to stop anything. The Christian nationalist agenda will be on the table. And they can get rid of any amendment, which means they can get rid of the Second Amendment too. Are you listening, Second Amendment folks? In the mock conventions that I told you they've already participated in, this is just some of the things that they've done in those conventions. They changed the Constitution so the Supreme Court will always have 9 and only 9 justices. They changed the tax law so that rich people won't have to pay any taxes. They did away with the federal government's ability to regulate commerce. There were no federal departments to regulate business, no federal means of protecting the environment, no guardrails on the safety of our food and our water and our medicines. They gave federal lands back to the states and opened the doors for mining and drilling. They also took away presidential term limits. They changed how we elect our president, and they imposed term limits on Congress and took away our ability to directly elect our senators. Those are just some of the things they did. There's so much more, but it can all be summed up pretty easily. They want an extremely powerful president with no term limits. They want a weak Congress that can't oppose it. And they want a weak election system so that you and I, so that we, the people, cannot depose him at the ballot box. The birthright citizenship call is a means to realize their dream of a Christo-fascist nation in which only white people have any rights. For you Second Amendment folks, this kind of government doesn't want its citizens to be armed. The Second Amendment will be gone too. This is why all of you who choose no party or a minor third party like the Greens, for now, you need to set all of that aside. There are 2 major parties in America, and they are not the same. Now is not the time to be neutral or to rebel against both parties, because they are not the same. One of them wants to radically transform our government so that it only cares and serves the rich and the white. The other one is the opposition. Join the Democratic Party, because there is no middle ground. There's only the alternative.